in crisis, I should remember that what I'm really thirsty for is a true idea. I'm not thirsty for more money. I'm not thirsty to pay this bill. I'm not even thirsty for a healing. What I'm thirsty for is a God idea. And so what happens is Elijah says, bring me a glass of water. The woman's like, sure. And as she turns to get a glass of water, Elijah says, oh, by the way, ma'am, bake me a cake too. The water wasn't enough. Bake me a cake. Now you got to hear her response. She said, as the Lord your God lives, I have nothing. Oh my God, I'm broke. Okay? Only a handful of meal in a jar and this little oil. I am now gathering a couple of sticks so that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, and that we may eat it and die. Now clearly, come on, we've all sung this song before. Come on, we've all spoken lack. We've all looked to the visible part of a situation and declared to the whole world, the situation is bleak. There's no hope. Okay? And so her first reaction was actually reasonable. Why? Because she was a widow. She had a son. She had no income. There was only this little handful of meal and a few drops of oil. She was going to mix it up, bake a cake. And so the lady was completely startled when the man of God, the prophet, turns to her and says, make me a cake. All right, some water I can scrounge up, but you want my last meal? You want my last flour and oil? After all, I guess, I just need to starve to death because there's no more food. Come on, is this foreign? Oh, there's no more gas. We're not going to have any more gas. Oh, there's going to be no more, this. Oh my God, Wall Street is collapsing. Oh my God, the world stock markets are falling apart. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Well, I guess I'll just hold on to this little, portion that God has given me, and I'll stretch it out, and then the whole planet will just, cease to exist. That's what I hear on the news. I don't know, do you watch TV? Is anybody up on current events? We do this all the time. We hold on to some small, pathetic little idea. And while we're so focusing on the small, pathetic little idea, the blessing is just floating right by our consciousness. And so the widow was completely unaware of the spiritual law of supply. I have two really close examples of this. Marie was on a plane last week, and she sits down, and she's sitting next to the plane, and she sits down in her seat, and a lady looks over to her and says, oh my God, do you believe how terrible the economy is? And so that's a 3-hour flight, and if that's the first thing that you hear, you know. So what does our wonderful Marie turn around, look at the lady and say, what's wrong with the economy? Marie said the woman just buried herself in some newspaper and looked at her like she was an alien from another planet, but didn't say another word to her for the whole flight. And then, God gives me great stories because, our own Marge, yesterday was feeling under the weather. And so her own neighbor, knowing that Marge is like fifth generation unity, her own neighbor has the nerve to walk up to her and say, oh, you're not going to church tomorrow, you're too sick. And Marge looks at her and goes, I'm going to church tomorrow. I have a God idea. And here she is. Someone looks at me and says, you're too poor, you're too sick. I want to say, no. I'm not even going to remain silent. I am going to verbally say, no, I don't care if you don't like me. Because I'm not going to spiritually agree with your sick idea of me. But this lady, her reaction was reasonable. But I want us to understand, it is not our possessions, but our spirit toward our possessions that creates richness in life. See, she reframed her panic, and she actually made him the cake in the story. And so Elijah represents a quality of God in us. Elijah represents that quality of God in Marie that said, what's wrong with the economy? That quality of God in Marge that said, I'm going to church tomorrow. It's my one day out, and it feeds me, and I am not going to miss church. And so Elijah represents what I understand and what Charles Fillmore says is the guardian of the divine law in us. And so what do we learn about Elijah? That the woman feeds him, goes to the barrel, the flour fills up, the oil pours. It's an idea that she realized it was the panic that was depleting her supply, and she learned that the prophet of God, the divine guardian of the divine law in us, always speaks the truth. Not only there was enough flour, enough oil, but it reproduces itself because thoughts reproduce in our life. So sick and lesser and fearful and lack thoughts reproduce in our life. Look at her first response was, oh, I guess we'll just starve to death. But you got to look at something really important, is she expected and knew the supply would fail, but not so fast. She was putting her power in that little handful of meal. And we do that all the time. But then we can reframe that fear that shows up. We can reframe the doubt that shows up. And we look at Elijah, and we think about Elijah. What does he teach? What does that divine guidance in us teach? Well, the first thing we see that Elijah did was, here's the man of God. He's the prophet of Israel. What did he do? Well, he swallowed his pride and asked for some help. Did you get that? Okay? He could have sat and got on his knees and prayed for some water, but he asked for some help, and he accepted it. He declared, not only has God ordained you, because remember, these are all characteristics in our mind. It's not like, I'm the man of God and Marge is the woman and somebody else outside is, the son. It's me, me, and me. These are all characteristics. It's the conversation that goes in my mind. And so there's a God idea that has to speak to the panic that shows up in my mind and say, what you release in fear, you let go of, because substance cannot be diminished when you come from a place of faith. And so we spoke about laws last week. We spoke about this all month. What leads us in a time of doubt or lack? Are we led by the news? Are we led by the fear? Are we led by the doubt? Or are we going to recognize that, and this too shall pass?